The sinners of the fourth slope, Dante tells us, are more in number than any I saw. They come shouting from each side, rolling weights with their chests. They crash into one another, then each turns round the other way. Miser, they shout, and waster. Dante asks for Virgil's explanation. Master, I ask him, who are they, these people? Were they all clerics, these tonsured ones on our left? And Virgil responds, everyone here was blind in his first life, mentally blind to any moderation over money. They are clerics, these without hair, in whom avarice triumphs totally. Their eternity is these two clashes, two teams who will leave their tombs with closed fists or shorn heads, hoarding or squandering ends here. In this fourth circle, the cheap bastards will joust with the profligate fools, the closed fists versus the shorn heads. In Dante's philosophy, wastefulness is a component of avarice. Not just a component, actually, because we read the words. Avarice triumphs totally in those shorn-headed clerics. These wasters clash with the miserly, in Dante's words, at the 2 points of the circle where vices come into opposition. Dante has created a vision for us of offsetting immoderate behavior. How badly would Dante chastise us if he ever were to hear someone who is bad with money because they waste it all the time, call themselves irresponsible? Dante would say, no, you are not irresponsible. You are greedy. Yours is the sin of greed. In you, avarice triumphs totally. This sort of circumspection is so lost today, for its ability to examine both active and passive forces that are both equally powerful and having negative societal effects, and that seemingly opposite behavior is the exact same sin, the sin of greed. They are offsetting. That's the best part about it, I think. The division of this circle is unique because he has taken the misers and the spendthrifts and given them equal torments. Dante typically enjoys dishing out unequal punishments, seeming to delight in an assessment of varying scales of sin. Here is one of the few places where he equalizes it. The misers and the spendthrifts are on an equal plane. It makes this circle unique. It also is unique because he specifically marvels at the population here, more in number than any I saw. Here, he indicates to us, this is where I'm talking to most of you, and I'm not going to bother to rank you. You're all the same. You're all equally greedy. It seems to directly contradict a view that is very common today of the greedy predator and the unsuspecting victim. We cannot suppose that the victim is greedy as well, except of course the Simpsons, which is willing to call the thing what it is.
20 on this one, my good man.
Sorry, dude. Black.
Homer, he cheated you.
Surely you don't blame me.
It's people like you who are ruining our downtown promenades and piazzas. How dare you prey on the greedy and stupid like this?
You really have to be paying attention to catch that on The Simpsons. They really squeeze that in there. The scamster preys on the greedy and stupid. And along these lines, I'm going to share a story that I experienced in my career as an attorney. The smartest lawyer I've ever gone up against was this woman who was a litigation counsel for the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I interacted with her on a Ponzi-style case. And this woman just knew her stuff unlike anyone I've ever gone up against. So when I got this opportunity to have a more general conversation with her about Ponzi schemes one day in the courthouse, I asked her, what do you make of these victims, and how do people keep falling for this stuff. And her response was very simple. People are greedy. To tell you the story that she told me was that she once had a case where the victims, who were the duped investors, received their initial dividends in unsealed envelopes in cash, and they said nothing. It's not just about being stupid. They knew. You can tell you're engaged in a criminal enterprise. They don't say anything because they're greedy. Now, as far as the Dante is concerned, it has to be said, within this circle, we must assume that neither side has engaged in fraud. The swindlers are in Canto XI. They get their own circle. In order to be placed in this section, it means you're to some extent honest. And so I think it's interesting to wonder if we want to associate the misers with sellers, spendthrifts, with buyers. In life, did they not then exchange? They engaged in commerce, the free exchange of currency for goods. So I think it's fascinating then to consider that the clash, that one rock against another, is an inversion of that free exchange that they did on earth. Here they clash. They're stuck with the burden of an of an untransferable economic unit in the boulder. They're stuck lugging it around. They can't exchange it for another boulder. They can't wisely make an investment in boulders. They can't exchange it for money. They're stuck with it. And they ventilate their frustration against each other with each clash. Dante mocks this in these words. So you see, my son, the poor joke of the goods we owe to fortune, that humans make such scrums for all the gold under the moon, past and present, it couldn't calm even one of these weary spirits. Those lines about all the gold under the moon, all the gold that ever existed in history and now, in and of itself given to any one person, could not calm them. I find that to draw a wonderful sense of self-centeredness to each of the individual souls, as well as imparting a sense of frustration to the observer. This unsolvable problem is presented for the reader who so easily imagines themselves to be a philosopher king, wondering what the solution is. There is no solution. It is an unsolvable problem. Dante purposefully generates frustration here. Even if you had the power to bestow all the wealth in history upon any one of these people, as though they were one of your subjects, you couldn't please one of them. But he also draws our attention to the self-centeredness of each of the individuals. Their avarice is so exorbitant that they would be displeased with their possessions even if the whole world were starving. In the very proportion with which greed is infinite in its covetousness, greed is also infinite in its indifference to other people. Dante makes that point with a great deal of vastness. It is deep. This is one of the deepest moments in the whole poem, I think. Looking at this massive population, more in number than any I saw, he ingeniously asks us to consider the insatiability of each one person at the very moment you're assessing them within this large mass. But continuing along the train of thought that Dante has placed the crown of philosopher king upon the reader, asking them to step in the shoes of any prospective ruler attempting to solve this problem, do you know what I think is the other thing that is implied here? Is that even if you could come up with a situation on Earth that did indeed distribute wealth in some way that you would like, do you know what I think Dante is still saying? Never mind just pleasing them. Neither can you save their souls. That's not within your power either. The true nature of their sin isn't in their possessions. It is in their agitation over them. All the gold under the moon, past or present, it couldn't calm even one of these weary spirits. Their sin is not in the extent of their possessions. Their sin is their agitation over them. How much you have is random. We know this because he tells us this. We owe our goods to fortune, he says, and fortune is a minister charged to rotate such vanities regularly, nation to nation, house to house. Her permutations know no pauses. You can't do anything about this. The sin isn't how much you have. He considers that to be random. The sin is your agitation. You can't figure out how to be happy with what you have. That concept continues as we continue on with the rest of the canto, and Dante sees more agitated spirits across to the circle's inner edge, he writes, as they enter a mire, a Stygian swamp as they approach the river Styx. He writes, "Here I was keen to look around, and I saw people in that marsh, naked and filthy and furious. They didn't just punch each other, but used heads, bodies, feet too, even their teeth to bite bits off." This is a combination of wrath and sloth. And I actually like the Hollander translation more here for some of these lines towards the end. I like it more than the Ellis. I usually use the Steve Ellis translation. The souls sing this song to him. "We were sullen in the sweet air that in the sun rejoices, filled as we were with slothful fumes. Now we are sullen in black mire." We were filled with slothful fumes. So isn't it funny that we just came from a place where all greed was evened out? The tortures of the greedy damned are equally distributed to the agitated rich and the agitated poor alike. The miserly shrewd crash against the wastefully stupid. But here we see that wrath and sloth are linked. Your fumes are slothful. In this canto, has not Dante quite beautifully considered the counterintuitive and opposing qualities within a sin, all bound by that great symptom, discontentedness? Discontentedness. He's blaming people for their discontent in medieval times, when people are dropping dead of diseases in their 20s and 30s. What would he say about us? What would he say about the modern discontents? I think he'd be fucking disgusted. That's what I think. Life's bitchers and moaners are gonna gargle on mud in a ghastly bog. Sludge swallowers, he writes. Their throats gargle this hymn, since they can't sing it clearly. The hymn, if they could say it clearly, was, "We were sad in the sweet, sun-livened air, carrying our own fog inside us." Dante feels justified saying that to dwellers of the Middle Ages. What would he say about people who carry their fog with them in the comforts of modern America? And I know what we might be thinking, and he's not taking it too far. He's not saying you're not allowed to be bothered by tragedy. This is what he wrote in one of the poems. This is the poem, "Oh, You Who Walk Along in Vita Nuova." He writes this, "And so, wishing to imitate those who conceal their want out of shame, I display a merry exterior, but in my heart I am consumed and I lament." So he's not saying that you're not allowed to grieve inwardly over something. He's saying make an effort to have a little bit of a happy exterior and not bring your fog with you into other people's shit. Don't be a wet blanket in the sun-livened air. You're allowed to be sad, though. So, we're on to Canto 8 next.